Our first question is from Naya and from Machidiso. Thank you, girls. Here we go. It's actually a very nice question. If we look at it, it's about ovulation, as you can see here. But look at it. It says the levels of 2 ovarian hormones. Now, we know that the ovarian hormones are estrogen and progesterone. These are the 2 hormones that are secreted in the ovary, all right? And your follicle stimulating hormone is secreted by the pituitary gland here. So the pituitary gland's right in the center of the brain, okay? And that is where it's secreted. Remember, your pituitary gland is the only gland that is both an exocrine and an endocrine gland. Now, the pituitary gland starts off by secreting follicle stimulating hormone. It's also called the master gland. I'm going to put that in brackets here. Okay. And the pituitary gland secretes follicle stimulating hormone. Now, this hormone clearly stimulates the follicle in the ovary to now develop around the little ovum, so that the little ovum, that little egg cell can grow to a point where it can be released in ovulation. So the follicle stimulating hormone causes the development of the follicle, which is in the ovary. And this follicle secretes estrogen. Remember, it's an ovarian hormone. So it's the follicle that secretes the estrogen. So as the follicle develops, it is going to secrete more and more, a higher and higher level and concentration of estrogen. Okay? That estrogen level, sorry, let me just take this out. The estrogen level increases nicely. And what does the estrogen level do? It causes the release of luteinizing hormone. But luteinizing hormone is secreted by the pituitary. Okay, so this is from the ovary because it's released by the follicle. And lots of estrogen causes the luteinizing hormone to be secreted by the pituitary. So what is luteinizing hormone? Let's do blue or green. So the luteinizing hormone then causes the ovulation. So you're going to have lots of luteinizing hormone here, and it's going to cause ovulation to take place. And what luteinizing also does, luteinizing hormone causes the Graafian follicle to release the ovum. Okay, that's ovulation. And the luteinizing hormone also causes, you see causes because it's a hormone, causes the Graafian follicle to convert to a, let me just zip this down, to a corpus luteum. Okay, and this corpus luteum is in the ovary. Just like the follicle was in the ovary, the corpus luteum is in the ovary. And what does the corpus luteum secrete? The corpus luteum now secretes this hormone B, and that hormone B is going to be progesterone. And that's why it's an ovarian hormone. And what does the progesterone do? Well, that in turn says when there are high levels of progesterone, it says to the pituitary gland, listen, bud, you don't have to secrete a follicle-stimulating hormone yet. And it's only when the progesterone level starts to decrease, because no fertilization took place, that follicle-stimulating hormone, the pituitary gland will now start releasing follicle-stimulating hormone, and the whole process will start again, the whole cycle will start again. So, estrogen You have your follicle stimulating hormone, and the follicle grows. And then as the follicle grows, it releases estrogen in the ovary. The estrogen levels increase, and as the estrogen levels increase, it stimulates the pituitary to release luteinizing hormone. The luteinizing hormone causes the Graafian follicle to burst and release the ovum and for ovulation, and it causes that Graafian follicle that's now released the ovum to now become the corpus luteum. And what's the corpus luteum's job? To release progesterone to make sure that the endometrial lining is maintained. Because remember, if fertilization occurs, it's the endometrium where that little fertilized zygote is going to implant. Okay, so it must make sure that that endometrium is all nice and ready for that implantation to happen. But if there's no fertilization, well, the Graafian follicle disintegrates, which means it produces less and less progesterone. So the pituitary is no longer inhibited from releasing follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. And you must know this whole hormonal control process. And that's why I said I'm very happy that both these ladies, both Naya and Mashadiso, sent this question in, because when they say ovarian hormones, we know it's estrogen and progesterone. When they talk about, let's do it here, pituitary hormones, we have number one, follicle stimulating hormone, and secondly, we have luteinizing hormone. And look, luteinizing hormone, and what does luteinizing hormone do? It causes the corpus luteum to develop. So luteinizing, luteum. Follicle stimulating hormone, the development of the follicle. Okay, so easy peasy. You can't get confused. Let's look at our questions quickly. It says, identify hormone A and B. Well, hormone A is going to be estrogen. Okay? Hormone B is going to be progesterone. And how do we know that it's estrogen and progesterone? Because, as I said to you, the graph tells us here, let me rub this out and get another color that we can, let's do blue. It is the two ovarian hormones, so estrogen and progesterone. Okay. And first we have estrogen and then we have progesterone. What effect does the increase in hormone A, which is estrogen, have on the endometrium? Well, wow, that is easy. It increases the thickness. So that's question 2. So question 3, what's it, 3.2. Oh man. I'm really doing this the long way around. Estrogen causes. Now remember, it's a hormone. People, hormones are chemical messengers. Don't ever in an exam say estrogen does this. It doesn't. It causes. Because hormones are chemical messengers. Chemical messengers that are released by endocrine glands. And because endocrine glands are ductless, the hormone is released directly into the blood. And it travels to a target organ and causes the target organ to perform a specific function. Okay, it's the whole coordination in the body between the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. That is where your coordination processes work. But your hormones are chemical messengers and they can't do anything. They're just a messenger. You know, so just think about if your principal sends a message to the teacher. It's not the principal that goes to the teacher. It's not the messenger that does the job. The principal sends a message using a messenger to the teacher to do the job. So the target organ, in this case, would be the teacher. The endocrine gland would be the principal. And the messenger would be the chemical hormone, or the chemical messenger called a hormone. All right, so estrogen causes the increase in the thickness of the endometrium. Now remember, the endometrium is the lining of the uterus, okay? And this thickness, an increase in the thickness, is because it makes the endometrium to make it more glandular and increase the blood supply. Now, why would it need to be more glandular and have more blood? Well, that is where that fertilized zygote, if fertilization takes place, is going to implant and grow into a little baby, all right? I shouldn't say baby because that's the wrong terminology. Okay, it's to grow from an embryo into a fetus. And remember, that change from embryo to fetus is at about 12 weeks. So up until 12 weeks, your placenta hasn't really developed. But from 12 weeks on, the placenta is 100% in place. And that's when we start calling that little thing growing inside there goes from a zygote to an embryo to a fetus. Okay, so you have an increase in the blood supply. And yeah, that's it. So you just have to say more glandular because there's more glandular tissue and an increase in the blood supply. And that's very, very important. And this, I think they gave you 3 marks for, which is, wow, it's a lot of marks for saying something as simple as that. Oh, it's 2 marks, sorry. All right, now, ovulation, let's do another color. Ovulation is indicated on the graph. So let's have a look. See here, ovulation is at approximately 14 days if the cycle is 27 to 28 days. So ovulation will be mid-cycle. Because remember, for the first 5 to 6 days, you have menstruation, which is when the endometrium lining breaks down. So when menstruation starts, that's when the cycle starts at day 1. So let's see what they're asking us. They say, ovulation is indicated in the graph. Define ovulation. People, ovulation is simply the release of the ovum from the Graafian follicle. So there's the Graafian follicle, or you can say mature Graafian follicle, but it is the release of the ovum by a mature Graafian follicle. Done, dusted, finished. Okay, so we've got ovulation sorted. On which day did ovulation take place? I mean, this question shouldn't even be here. Because look at this. Oh man, they tell you day 14. So there you can see day 14. And you can see the word ovulation at the top here. And I'm not sure why this thing is doing this. So let's just get our pen again. Okay, so it's day 14. And then it says, so day 14, which you just have to read off the graph. Which hormone secreted by the pituitary gland stimulates ovulation? Well, I have already told you it is LH, which is luteinizing hormone. You can write it out if you want to, but it's so much easier just to put LH. It's luteinizing hormone. All right, then it says explain why the high levels of hormone B, now remember hormone B is progesterone. And if you can't remember, just write it down here for yourself so that you remember progesterone. I left the E off there, Doffy. Okay, must be less careless than I am in the exam. So high levels of hormone B prevented the development of new follicles. That process is called a negative feedback process. So for question, what's it, 2.4, I can't, okay. We're now looking at why. So progesterone, it's why. Why high levels of progesterone prevents the development of a new follicle? It was 3.2.4, but okay, it doesn't really matter. Okay, so this is what's important. You must say that your high levels of progesterone will inhibit. Now, people, inhibit is not the same as stop. If I stop something, let's say I stop someone. If I stop them, I put a big sign there and say, stop, you can't move. Not allowed to do anything. But if I inhibit them, it would be like putting my arms around them and holding them for a couple of minutes. So I'm inhibiting them. I'm not stopping them. I'm inhibiting them. And then as soon as I let go, they can now move again. Okay, so high levels of progesterone will inhibit, and that's the important word here. It inhibits the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone. Okay, and what does that cause? So that no new follicles will develop and no ovulation will take place. Now think about this logically. Let's say fertilization does take place, all right? If progesterone doesn't stop the pituitary from or inhibit the pituitary from releasing follicle stimulating hormone, the ovary is going to make another follicle, okay, which will then mature at day 14 and release an ovum during ovulation. So now what? Imagine if that gets fertilized. So you will have an embryo that is a month old, or say an embryo that's 2 months old, an embryo that's 1 month old here in your uterus, and then the next month you'll have a third embryo. I mean, so you could literally be carrying 3 embryos and 6 fetuses by the time you get to a 9-month period. I mean, can you imagine what we'd look like? We would have like a uterus and a tummy that was like here. We'd all look like little hippos. Okay? That's not the case. So as soon as the ovary or the uterus is holding one embryo, you've got to stop this whole menstrual cycle until that little embryo has developed into a fetus and you have given birth. Okay, that's the issue here. You've got to keep everything like that. So stop all the other things and focus on this little embryo growing and the little fetus growing. So that is why the high progesterone levels, and this, by the way, this whole story here is a perfect example of negative feedback mechanism. When you have a high level of progesterone, it inhibits the secretion of follicle stimulating hormone. When the progesterone level decreases, it stops inhibiting follicle stimulating hormone, and more follicle stimulating hormone is released, and we have the whole process happening again. So the menstrual cycle starts all over. Explain evidence in the graph that indicates that no fertilization took place during this menstrual cycle. Well, let's have a look here. Let's get red. Okay, look at your progesterone level. The progesterone level goes up, up. Okay, it gets to here and it starts to dip a little bit. And if fertilization was going to take place, it would have been at about day 21, 22. Okay, so, or fertilization, now that little embryo is starting to grow. Because remember, fertilization takes place about here. Now that little embryo has to start growing. And as it grows, it then stimulates an increased production of progesterone, and the progesterone levels stay there. If no fertilization occurs, it goes zhoops and it goes down. And it's this lack of progesterone and lack of estrogen that then says to the pituitary, okay, guy, you need to get ready now. And while the pituitary starts releasing at this point follicle stimulating hormone to stimulate the growth of the follicles so that it can now start releasing estrogen. Okay, you now strip the body of that endometrium, you have menstruation occurring, and now the endometrium can now start to thicken, which is one of the functions of the estrogen. Your progesterone merely maintains the endometrium, but it's the estrogen that builds or causes the building of that endometrium.